A dust-laden breeze drifted through the narrow streets of Redstone, whispering secrets among weather-beaten planks and the edge of worn leather. The town sat nestled in a forgotten valley, hemmed in by rust-colored mesas that rose like silent sentinels. In its heart, the jailhouse key rattled against a traveler's hip, an omen to all who arrived. Redstone measured newcomers by their burdens, and only a few ever unshackled them. When Zara Beaumont stepped off the creaking stagecoach, she felt the weight of every glance. Her satchel thumped against her leg with each tentative step, reminding her of the limp she had long tried to tame. Zara's dark curls framed a face that bore both hope and trepidation. High cheekbones dusted with desert grime, eyes the color of storm clouds gathering beyond the mesas, and lips set in a determined line. She had come here as a mail-order bride, a fate she had once viewed as her only escape from the orphanage's cold halls. Now, as she inhaled the stifling air and tasted the swirl of dust and sweat, she wondered whether freedom and shame might wear the same face. Outfits of faded wool and chapping coats swirled about her. Miners, ranch hands, and drifters whose faces had learned to read strangers like open ledgers. Their curiosities lingered on Zara's gait, a polite hobble that hinted at something broken, something she could not hide. She drew her grey shawl tighter, hoping to obscure the brace beneath. Her skirt, but she might as well have tied a lantern around her ankle. A grizzled station attendant approached. His hat angled low, and his whiskers draped over a scowl that seemed carved from the earth itself. "Name?" he asked, his voice rasping like tumbleweed. "Zara Beaumont," she replied, lifting her chin even as her heart fluttered. "Here to meet my husband." He tilted his head, eyes narrowing at her limp, and whistled low. "Strong man, or did he take pity?" Zara bit back her retort. Pity, she had learned, cut deeper than disrespect. Instead, she lifted her chin until his gaze faltered. "He hurt himself before knowing me." His startled blink lasted a heartbeat. "Name?" She spoke again, voice steady, as if reciting years of practiced composure. "Zara Beaumont. And I am not what you think." He spat, then nudged her toward the street. Beyond, the town unfurled in a tapestry of cracked storefronts. The Redstone Saloon's chipped sign, the general store boasting a chalkboard propped against its door, the blacksmith's hammer hammering a metallic rhythm that felt like the heart of this place. Zara's breath caught as she glanced around. The dusty path ahead split toward the saloon and a cluster of houses perched on a rocky rise. She adjusted her shawl and started down the street, each step a testament to her stubborn resolve. Her stomach roiled at the thought of meeting Samuel Harrington, the man who'd written to her from his Bar H Bar ranch. 50 letters in 6 months, tender, kind, and promising he would welcome her with open arms. He had never seen her limp. The letters danced with hope. He spoke of evenings by the hearth, of walks beneath the canyon sky, of a life together built on truth and partnership. But here, in Redstone, letters mattered little. A limp marked a woman as broken. A bride bought and mailed in a stack of correspondence marked her as disposable. She could feel the laughter behind leathered faces when she stumbled over a stray rock. She could taste the mockery in their half-whispered bets. How long before she ran back to the orphanage? How many drinks before she admitted defeat? How many days before her husband sent her packing? The Redstone Saloon door swung wide, and the hush of music and laughter spilled into the street. The sign's painted image of a dancing cowgirl glimmered beneath the midday sun, her skirt swirling as if alive. Zara paused, her breath catching at the thought of stepping inside. Men in dusty hats and carding waists glanced up, their eyes tracing her from brace to cheek. Whispers followed her like ghosts, and she hunched her shoulders, steel melting in her veins. Yet the letters Samuel sent promised acceptance. Letters adorned with smudged ink hearts and scrawled rhymes. Letters that whispered his longing. He had promised to meet her here. Clutching her satchel, Zara entered. The scent of whiskey and tobacco swirled around her, and laughter tumbled over every surface. The saloon's wooden floorboards creaked under her tread as she made her way to the center, where a bar stretched in a polished sweep. A bartender polished glasses with a rag that had seen too many spills. He lifted his head, eyes narrowing, then returned to his work. She swallowed, as if steeling herself against a rising tide. "I am to meet Samuel Harrington," she said, voice unsteady. "Bar H, Bar Ranch." The bartender's raised eyebrow was an invitation to ridicule, but he kept silent. Instead, he pointed to a corner table lit by a crack of sunlight. 3 men turned to stare, 2 sheriff's deputies in fresh badges and a lone figure hunched in shadow. Zara's heart skipped. Was that him? The lone figure stood, revealing a sturdy frame bound at one knee. His hat dipped low, and she could see the polished wood of a prosthetic limb peeking from beneath his pant leg. Her breath hitched, and she raised a hand to her chest. He removed his hat and stepped forward. The deputies exchanged glances, but did not move to intervene. He approached with a gait that reflected years spent staking territory beneath an unforgiving sun. Each step was measured, deliberate, a dance between flesh and wood that spoke of hardship and of perseverance. When he was near enough, Zara saw his face fully, a square jaw softened by shadowed stubble, eyes the hue of prairie grass after spring rain, and a smile that trembled like a fragile bloom. "Zara Beaumont?" he asked, his voice low, carrying the weight of someone who had seen a struggle of his own. She nodded, forcing her knees to steady. "Mr. Harrington." He held out a hand, calloused but gentle. "Colton Reeves," he said. "I was told to expect you." She blinked. Colton Reeves. The name had been buried beneath 6 months of letters, signed Harrington, a mistake she had not known might shock her. She felt a flutter of panic, as if the ground beneath her had shifted without warning. Colton lowered his hand, his brow knitting. "You said Harrington." I thought you were Samuel Harrington," she stammered, cheeks flushing. The 2 deputies tensed, their hands inching toward holsters, as though they believed she might flee or strike. Yet Zara did neither. Instead, she shrugged as best she could and murmured, "My mistake." Colton's expression hardened, a flicker of disappointment passing through his gaze, yet within the same breath, tenderness flickered. He waved at the deputies, who relaxed but remained poised. "Colton Reeves runs Bar H Bar now." He paused, studying her limp. "The ranch took on a new owner last year. It was Samuel who wrote you. I'm his partner." 1,000 questions erupted in Zara's mind, but she breathed deeply, recalling the warmth in Samuel's letters, his assurances that her limp would matter little when hearts bonded. She met Colton's gaze and offered the faintest smile. "Healed. By the right one," she whispered, recalling the closing line of Samuel's last letter. Colton's shoulders loosened. "You're brave," he said. "Come, we'll get you a meal and talk about it. But first, let me see that brace." Her pulse thundered as he knelt before her, eyes level with her knee. The wooden prosthetic felt foreign, yet in his presence it seemed less monstrous. He slid a hand beneath her skirt's hem, gingerly lifting the fabric to reveal the brace's polished steel and faded leather straps. He traced the metals, a cold curve with a reverence that made her heart tilt. "You did well to come," he said softly. "No one here will count your worth by what's broken." Her breath hitched, and she blinked as his words settled like seeds within her chest. She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. The deputies turned away, their stares replaced by conversations revived. Colton rose and offered her an arm. "Let me get you a chair inside." He guided her past clusters of rough-spoken men and women in overalls. A pianist struck a chord, one note echoing in the hush of anticipation. The saloon's rafters held a dozen crossed rifles and horseshoes, a testament to triumphs and tragedies alike. As Zara settled onto a wooden chair, she felt the creak beneath her, an unsteady affirmation that nothing was certain in Redstone. Colton took a seat across from her, leaning forward. "Tell me what you saw in Samuel's letters." Zara nodded, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. He wrote of kindness, of building a life together. He described a house by the creek where the morning light danced on the water. He spoke of understanding and of never seeing me as less. He said he believed two broken souls could build a home stronger than any whole heart. Colton's gaze softened, and a shadow passed across his eyes. "Samuel was a good man," he said. "He believed in me when I lost my leg. We built this ranch together. When he said he wanted to marry you, I thought finally someone would heal two halves at once." His voice cracked. "I'm sorry. It should have been clear." Tears blurred Zara's vision, but she blinked them away. "He is dead?" Colton nodded. "Last winter a storm swept in. He rode out to help a stranded herd and never came back, found 3 days later pinned under a broken wagon wheel." His jaw clenched. "I wrote to you because I believed you should know. I hoped you'd still come. He wanted you here, Zara." Her heart wrenched. Samuel's warmth, his promises, she had carried them across plains and canyons, deeper than Redstone's dust. Her legs trembled and she gripped the edge of the chair, as if it were a lifeline. "I came for him," she whispered. "Now I'm here for what? For you?" Colton's eyes shimmered with a mix of regret and longing. "I came to see you." He reached into a pouch at his belt and withdrew a silver locket. "Sam asked me to give this to you. He said, if I'm gone, tell her I loved her. And that she mattered more than all the lands we own." Zara took the locket, fingering its cool surface. She opened it to find a faded photograph. Samuel's smiling face on the ranch porch, sunlit hair tousled by wind. He held a colt in one hand, and his other hand hovered near his heart. Beneath was etched a line, "To Zara my heart rides with you." Her breath caught. She closed the locket, tears slipping free. Colton reached across, pressing her knuckles gently. "Your journey didn't end with Sam's passing. He wanted you to find home, even if it's not what you envisioned." Zara nodded, her mind a whirlwind. The saloon's music swelled as if echoing the ache in her chest. She swallowed, steeling herself. "What now?" she whispered. Colton's gaze drifted to the sunset beyond the saloon windows, streaks of crimson and gold bleeding into the horizon. "Now, we honor his wish." He stood, offering Zara an elbow for support. "Come. The ranch won't wait. We have work, and I'd like you by my side." She hesitated, the locket warm in her palm. She thought of Samuel's letters, the hope in his inked words. She thought of the dust swirling in the saloon, the faces that had judged her before she spoke. She thought of Colton's leg, the echo of his struggle. As she rose, her brace protesting, a hush fell over the saloon. Hats tipped, whispers ceased. Horses outside snorted, sensing change in the gathering twilight. Zara fixed her gaze on Colton's back as he opened the swing doors. A gust of wind swept through, carrying the scent of hay and driftwood. She stepped into that wind, forging toward the unknown. Each step a fragile promise. She would not run. She would not hide. She would become whole again, not despite her brokenness, but because of it. Beyond the saloon, the mesas glowed like embers in the dying light. Zara's shadow stretched across the dirt, elongating until it reached the edge of darkness beyond the lamplight. As she followed Colton toward the ranch, she felt the brace at her knee a little less heavy, and that night, as she lay under a quilt in a cabin by the creek, she dreamed of voices calling her name, a whisper in the wind, a promise carried by horses' hooves. She woke to the distant call of an owl, her heart pounding with questions. Who was she now, if not a bride to a man she had never met? Could she forge a new purpose here, among strangers who already saw her as broken? A thunderclap rumbled through the valley, and Zara bolted upright. The large window at the foot of her bed framed flashlights racing across the open plains. She peered through the glass, seeing silhouettes converging near the barn, men on horseback, guns strapped to their sides. Her breath caught as thunder rolled again. Colton's footsteps approached, heavy and deliberate. He paused at her door. "Zara," he said, urgency threading through his voice. "Get dressed, we're needed outside." Her pulse thundered. She grabbed her boots, heart hammers at a question that stretched across the dark. What haunted the night beyond the ranch? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. Zara's breath caught in her throat as she pulled on her worn leather boots. The crisp night air bit at her cheeks, and the quilt slipped from her shoulders like a discarded promise. She stumbled to the window's edge, the faint glow of lanterns flickering across the prairie beyond. Horses stamped anxiously near the barn, their hooves churning loose soil. The distant mesas stood silent, their silhouettes etched against a sky studded with cold, indifferent stars. She slipped into her skirt and layered a coarse woolen shawl around her shoulders, each movement careful, measured. Her brace protested beneath the fabric, but she refused to show weakness. Colton's footsteps came quickly down the creaking floorboards. The door swung open, revealing his tall frame, shadows slanting across his features. Under his wide-brimmed hat, his eyes glowed with determined fire. "Zara," he whispered, voice taut like a bowstring. "Stay close." She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. He offered her his arm, and she leaned into him, finding solidarity in his steady presence. Together they slipped out of the cabin into the moonlit yard. The barn's double doors stood ajar, heavy timbers groaning as if guarding a secret. The lanterns they carried cast twisting shadows that danced on the nearby corral. Men on horseback hovered in semicircles, 6 of them, rifles resting on their knees, dark silhouettes cutting the prairie's outline. Their horses' nostrils flared, steam curling in the icy air. One rider knocked the brim of his hat back, revealing a face half covered by stubble and scars that told tales of violence. He raised a pistol and lit the match on its side, the flame sputtering to life. "Thought you'd hide behind her, Reeves," the man called out, in voice laced with contempt. "But blood's thicker than loyalty, aren't you? You owe us." Colton's jaw tightened. He stepped forward, the lantern's glow rhyming his prosthetic knee with light. "Not tonight." His voice was calm, but the set of his shoulders spoke of coiled tension. The scarred rider spat, the match waned, and the pistol's barrel glinted. "We've come for our cut of the herd, and you'll give it or we'll take it. That woman's worth nothing, Reeves. Send her home, and no one gets hurt." A harsh laugh rippled through the other men. Zara's heart pounded. She felt cold. Sweat pricked her skin, as if the night air had frozen around her bones. She gripped Colton's arm, nails digging into his sleeve. "Zara," Colton murmured, eyes never leaving the scarred outlaw. "Step behind me." She obeyed, stepping into his shadow. Her ribs pressed against his side, and she felt his breath steady, measured. He was calm, too calm for someone facing down 6 armed riders in the dead of night. Her mind raced. Who were these men? Why had they come now, as if the timing had been orchestrated by fate itself? The scarred rider kicked at the dirt, leaning forward. "Harrington's sold us out, you hear? Now you answer for his debts." Colton's fist clenched. At his side, "He died saving that herd. I won't stand by and watch you defile his memory." A rider to the scarred man's right chuckled. "Memory don't fill empty coffers, Reeves. We're hungry, and we'll take what we need." He flicked his wrist, and a dog bayed in the darkness. Another man lit a torch near the barn entrance. Shadows lengthened, twisting into ghostly forms that rushed toward the corral. Horses shied, stamping unevenly. Zara's pulse thundered. She leaned into Colton's leg, feeling the cold metal of his prosthetic, its smooth surface almost soothing in the turmoil. She swallowed hard and whispered, "Will you be all right?" The words felt small against the vastness of the night. Colton's gaze flickered to her. "I will. You need to move the horses." She blinked, puzzlement twisting her gut. "But—" He pressed a finger to his lips, then turned to the men. "Do as she says, or I'll send you along to Hellstone faster than you can draw breath." The scarred rider sneered. "Oh, the bride's a cowhand now. Let's see." He jerked his horse, urging it toward Zara's mare, tied to a post near the corral fence. The animal whinnied, tossing its head as the rider reeled in the reins. "Zara, go!" Colton hissed. She forced her legs into motion, uneven steps dragging her toward the corral. Her skirt caught on a nail, and she wrenched herself free, the fabric tearing in protest. Her brace clicked against the wood, a staccato heartbeat that echoed in her ears. The scarred rider spurred his horse toward the mare, lasso looped, ready to snatch her from the post. Zara's lungs burned. She crawled forward on one knee, then pushed herself upright, arms shaking. Time slowed. The rider raised the lasso, the rope coiled like a rattlesnake. "No!" she screamed, voice cracking like ice breaking. She flung a rock toward the horse's flank. The rock struck true. The horse reared, nostrils flaring, hooves scrabbling against the ground. The rider yelped as the animal bucked, losing balance. The rope slipped from his grasp. He tumbled from the saddle, hat flying, and landed in a heap. The horse galloped off into the darkness. Gasps rose from the outlaw riders. Colton seized the moment, drawing his rifle with precision born of necessity. He rested the barrel on his prosthetic knee and leveled his sight. Another rider, hair matted and eyes bloodshot, urged his horse closer, pistol drawn. Zara's vision blurred. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she lunged to free the mare's rope. Her fingers closed around the coarse hemp. She yanked the halter free, and the mare trotted behind her, eyes wide with fear. A shot rang out. The bullet whistled past Colton, striking the fence post with a shattered crack that splintered wood like shattered bones. Splinters flew, and a jagged splinter lodged in Zara's shawl. She recoiled, her breath rattling from impact. Colton's head snapped toward her, eyes blazing. "Get inside!" he roared. But Zara stood frozen, torn between flight and the urge to defend the man who had saved her from shame. The outlaw with the pistol banked his horse, the silver muzzle glinting in lantern light. He leveled the pistol at Colton's chest. Colton's expression hardened. He steadied his rifle. Time stretched, tension coiling between the two men. Leathered horses snorted, restless. Zara's limbs trembled. She heard the outlaw's breathing, rasping, calculated like a predator about to pounce. The outlaw fired. The shot exploded into the stillness. Zara's scream tore from her lips as Colton crumpled, rifle clattering to the ground. Blood blossomed on his shirt, dark as fresh-turned earth, spreading in a terrible circle. His prosthetic leg buckled, and he slid to his knees, staring at the wound in disbelief. Zara dropped the halter, legs going slack. Her world tilted, the night yawning beneath her. The mare nickered, pawing the ground in alarm. The outlaw laughed, a harsh bark that echoed in the silent cruelty of the prairie. "Ride off. The ranch is ours." He spurred his horse, and the riders melted into the darkness, torches flickering as they disappeared. The barn door thudded shut behind them, plunging the yard into suffocating blackness. Caught between shock and panic, Zara lurched forward, her shawl snagged on the fence. She tore it free and stumbled to Colton's side, cradling his head. His breathing was ragged, each gasp shaky as autumn leaves in a storm. "Colton!" she sobbed, pressing her fingers to his wound. The blood seeped through her fingers, warm and sticky. She pressed harder, but it soaked through. Colton's gaze flickered to hers, pain and regret pooling in his storm-grey eyes. "Zara, you shouldn't." His voice rasped, each word a struggle. "Hold on." She pressed firmer, tears blurring her vision. "I'll get help." He shook his head, grimacing. "No, no more running." His hand brushed her cheek, fingers trembling. "You are not broken. You are stronger." Her tears fell unchecked. She looked at the widening stain on his shirt, her heart splitting in two. She couldn't leave him here. The barn door was closed. The ranch hands remained in scattered cabins. "Stay with me," she whimpered. "Please." Her voice cracked like old leather. "Stay with me." Colton's eyes softened. "Always." He coughed, beads of blood flecking his lips. His smile was fragile, an ember fighting the dark. He closed his eyes. Zara shook him fiercely. "Don't." Desperation warped her words as she sought his gaze. "Colton, wake up!" She slapped his cheek, praying for a response. His chest heaved once more, but his eyes stayed closed. The silence that followed roared louder than any howling wind. Zara's fingers curled into fists, knuckles white as bone. She pressed down. On the wound again, her mind a whirlwind of fear and determination. She rose on trembling legs, the mare her only witness. The barn loomed behind her, silent as a tomb. She must reach the cabin, get help. But every step felt like walking through quicksand, the prairie beneath her shifting. A distant owl called, and Zara froze. Somewhere beyond the darkness, alone, coyote howled. Her breath hitched. She cast a glance back at Colton's still form, heart hammering. The wind whispered across the plains, carrying the scent of blood and gunpowder. Her hand tightened around the locket at her throat. She lowered her head and set her jaw. If she failed, she'd never forgive herself. She had come too far, been judged too harshly, risked too much. Gathering every ounce of resolve, Zara turned and hobbled toward the cabins, each breath a prayer. Shadows stretched, mocking her pace as if urging her to falter, but she refused to yield. Lightning flickered on the horizon, and the sky cracked open with thunder's roar. The rain began as a whisper, then pounded the earth in relentless rat-tat-tat, each drop a staccato heartbeat. Zara stopped under a gnarled mesquite tree, rain soaking her hair and shifting her shawl. She looked up at the downpour, sodden tears on her cheeks, indistinguishable from the rain. The storm seemed to weep with her. She whispered a vow as thunder rattled the heavens. "Stay alive, Colton Reeves. I will not let this end with your fall." And, as the rain washed the world clean, Zara took her first step toward salvation, or ruin, knowing that the line between triumph and despair was as thin as the blade of a knife. The pre-dawn stillness pressed against the cabin's walls as Zara knelt, her rifle clutched in shaking hands. The final storm's echoes had faded, leaving only the soft hiss of melting puddles and the occasional creak of timber settling. She could feel her heart hammering against her ribs, each beat a reminder of Colton's labored breathing behind her. The locket she held in one hand felt heavy, an anchor of hope and mourning entwined. She rose slowly, sweat-slicked palms tightening around the rifle's barrel. She had vowed to wait for dawn before investigating the wounded figure, yet the grey light seeping through the cabin's cracks beckoned her. With a resolute breath, she pushed open the door. The world outside was muted. The barn's silhouette stood watch, its doors still shut. The corral was marred by hoofprints and a dark patch of blood that glistened in the morning's pale glow. Zara's boot sank into the soggy earth as she stepped forward, eyes narrowing at the motionless form sprawled near the fence. Every second felt taut, as if the prairie itself held its breath. The sporadic whicker of the mare drifted from the corral, a reminder of fragile life sustained. She approached cautiously. Mud clung to her skirts, rainwater seeping into her boots. When she crouched beside the figure, dread coiled in her gut. The man's face was turned from her, a loose fibered cloth stained crimson, body twitching with shallow breaths. He wore rough-spun clothes, once sturdy but now torn and dirtied. His hand was pressed to a deep gash on his thigh, dark blood soaking the fabric beneath. Her breath caught. This man was no wiry outlaw. His features were young, angles softened by loss and desperation. He lifted his head, revealing eyes glazed with pain and fear. When he spoke, his voice was nothing more than a rasp. "Spare me, ma'am. They'll kill me if they find out I—" Zara froze, shock raging. He had called her ma'am, polite, respectful. The weight of his gaze burned through her. "Who are you?" she asked softly, kneeling. Her voice trembled, but she willed. A steady tone. She knelt and laid her rifle aside, one hand moving toward her sash, where smaller knives were hidden. "Tell me," he coughed, blood flecking the corner of his mouth. "Name's Jeb Turner." His eyes drifted to the barn where the sun was cresting over the horizon, shafts of gold piercing the stable gloom. "I can't run no more. My legs bust up pretty bad." Memories of Colton's wound flickered like lanterns in her mind. She swallowed, a mix of fear and duty knotting her chest. "Who shot you?" Her fingers hovered over the wound, hesitation fierce. Jeb swallowed hard. "Outlaws, Davenports, men. We was hired to harass the ranch, drive us off, let them take what they want." He shuddered, pain radiating with each pulse. "That boss of theirs, a scar-faced man called Gideon. He said if we didn't follow orders, he'd get himself a new crew." Zara's hands clenched at her sides. Gideon's name pressed like a stone against her throat. "Why didn't you leave?" she demanded. He closed his eyes, pain contorting his features. "I tried. I rode west to find help. They caught me halfway, tore up my horse and laid me out." "Here." His breath rasped. "I seen you shoot. You did that, didn't you?" Her voice caught. "Yes." She forced calm. "I thought you was one of them." He shook his head. "No, I was hired. Davenport don't care who bleeds, as long as the ranch is bleeding more. I swear Tate ain't Heaven Boy's kin. I just needed coin." Zara's mind raced. Davenport, Gideon, names that tangled with threat. She pressed her hand against his thigh, gauging the wound's depth. The ripped flesh was raw, fatty tissue visible beneath. "Stay still." She tore strips from her skirt, fashioning a makeshift bandage. Each movement was urgent, every second amplifying Jeb's rapid pulse as she bound the wound. His pain slowed, replaced by a distant shock. Why help me?" he whispered. She met his eyes. "Because no man should die alone in the dust over a man's greed." The words sounded hollow against the morning stillness. She rose, studying the valley. The barn doors still loomed, closed. Ranch hands had gathered near the cabins, faces drawn as they watched her. Zara's gaze snapped to Jeb. "Can you get to your feet?" He shook his head, lips pressed tight. "Hell no." Her jaw tightened, determination coalescing. She knelt again. "Then you ride with me. I'll get you to Dark Rivers." Jeb's eyes widened. "Ma'am, I can't ride no horse." She stared at him, fire kindling in her chest. "Watch me." She hurled her rifle toward the barn's door, the dull thunk echoing. "Colton taught me how to ride. If you want to live, hold on." Before Jeb could answer, a distant shout ripped through the air. Zara froze, anticipation twisting her gut. She rose, scanning the ridge above the barn. Figures emerged. 6 men on horseback, silhouettes against bright morning light. Their horses snorted, nostrils flaring. At their lead was a tall man, hat brim low, scar slicing across his cheek. Gideon. Her pulse kicked. The men galloped, the ground shuddering beneath the hooves. Reed-colored dust trailed behind them, a storm following their charge. "Damn her!" Gideon's voice boomed, harsh as gravel. "She'll bleed with the rest of this god-forsaken place." Zara's mind snapped to action. She sank low behind. The fence corner, eyes narrowing at Jeb's wide stare. She grabbed his arm. "Climb up the rail, hold on tight." He hesitated, pain clouding his expression. "I can't." "You must," she snarled. "If you don't, they'll kill you. Now move." With fierce resolve, she hauled him by his good arm onto the fence's top rail. He winced, adjusting until his leg dangled. Zara shoved the rifle into Jeb's hands. "Aim for the horses. Just hold on and fire when I say." He nodded, bracing himself. "Promise you won't leave me." She pressed her forehead to his. "Shoulder. Promise." The outlaw's approach was thunderous. Gideon's men fanned out, guns raised. The mare, sensing danger, reared, whinnied, half wild. Slate-colored dawn light gilded her figure. Zara placed 2 fingers on Jeb's back. "Now!" she hissed. With a nerveless grip, Jeb fired. The shot cracked. One horse collapsed in a spray of dust and blood, rider thrown. The remaining men hesitated, confusion flickering. Rebel weight shifted the moment. "Fall back!" Gideon bellowed, swinging his horse toward Jeb and Zara. "Take her alive!" Zara fired, her aim steady. A bullet slashed the reins of another horse, sending it bucking. Riders scrambled, entangled in chaos. She seized Jeb's rifle, holding both weapons as Gideon charged forward. Smoke and dust swirled. The fence quivered under the rider's hoofbeats. Zara readied herself, believing the next second would shatter everything. Afternoon's heat smothered the valley. The ranch yard lay deserted, torch debris lingering as the only testament to dawn's violence. Zara sat against a splintered fence post, sweat stinging her eyes. She had loaded Jeb onto a buckboard, the younger man wrapped in linen and brandy. He nodded off, pain sleep heavy on his brow. Her mind churned, replaying Gideon's furious charge and the deafening crack of gunfire. The wounded outlaw had fled, dragging 2 horses behind. Zara could almost see Gideon's face. Cruel lips twisted in rage, eyes dark as midnight. A handful of his men remained, corralled by Colton's ranch hands, but Gideon had escaped across the valley. She pressed her hand to her side, palm aching from her own wound, where a splinter had cut her ribs. The wound had bled freely before. She bound it with strips of her skirt. Pain had bled into her mind, but she had no time for weakness. Colton's voice drifted on the heat-shimmered air. "Your shooting saved us." He limped toward her, each step measured, shadowed by the afternoon sun. His shirt was fresh and clean. Dr. Rivers had stitched his wound with precision, summoning mercy in every knot. "You should not have been." "Out there," Colton said, voice low. "Do you know how close Gideon's revolver was to my chest?" Zara met his gaze, sweat-darkened hair clinging to her forehead. "He would have killed Jeb. I couldn't let that happen." Her lips quivered. "I had to try." Colton knelt, gripping her hand. "You were afraid." His eyes narrowed, searching her soul. "But you did it anyway." Her chest heaved. She turned her head toward the barn, where Jeb lay, murmuring in his sleep. "He's alive because of Colton Reeves and Zara Beaumont." She looked back, defiance sparking. "We stand together. Don't question me." Colton's gaze softened. He traced a finger along her jaw. "I won't." He stood, helping her to her feet. "But we need allies. Gideon'll return with a full force." Zara squared her shoulders. "Then we gather ours. We bring in the ranch hands, rally them. We won't be easy prey." He offered a shadow of a smile. "That's why I need you, mind and heart." He limped to where Jeb wheezed in fevered sleep. Zara followed, heart twisting as she saw the boy's face, pale, soaked with sweat, yet etched with quiet wonder. When Jeb's eyes flickered open, he offered a weak grin. "Thank you," he croaked. She squeezed his hand. "Rest. You'll live." Jeb's gaze flicked to Colton. "Why help me?" I did this to myself. Colton sat beside him. Because vengeance is a poison, and this land is more than blood and dust. He paused, chest rising. With gentle breaths, we fight to protect each other. Jeb closed his eyes, pain sleep claiming him again. Zara knelt beside Colton. We need to trek to Redstone for supplies, she murmured, and warn the town. Colton nodded, gaze distant. Yes, they deserve to know what's coming. He rose, extending a hand to Zara. She took it. Together, they left Jeb in Dr. Rivers' care and set off across the scorched earth, where hoofprints and splintered wood marked the night's fury. As they walked, dust rising in their wake, Zara's thoughts flickered to Samuel's locket at her throat. She clutched it, drawing strength from the promise engraved within. At the valley's edge, where sagebrush met rolling grass, Zara halted. The wind whispered through the brush, carrying the scent of distant smoke, evidence that Gideon's men were regrouping. Her jaw set. This land will not be ours if we cower. Colton rested a hand on her shoulder, gentle as dawn's first light. We will not cower. Together, we'll see this through. She nodded, eyes fixed on the horizon where Redstone sprawl waited. Below Red Rock cliffs. Let's go warn the people. The wind shifted, carrying an unanswered promise. Vengeance would come, but so would resistance. And Zara Beaumont, once mocked for her limp, would stand as the unexpected defender of a land, caught between greed and hope. Zara and Colton crested the ridge overlooking Redstone, just as the orange glow of sunrise painted the valley's rim. Redstone's cluster of rooftops lay nestled against the rust-colored cliffs, a sprawl of sun-bleached wood. Smoke rose from a solitary chimney, a hopeful sign of life stirring after the night's terrors. Below, dusty streets wound past shuttered storefronts and the looming jailhouse, its barred windows stark against weathered planks. Zara surveyed the town with narrowed eyes, adrenaline coiling in her chest. Gideon's threat still clung to every breeze, every restless horse's snort echoing in her mind. Colton's steady presence beside her was a tether, both reassuring and sobering. They can't ignore us, Zara said, voice low. We need to find Sheriff Mallory. Colton shifted the leather satchel slung over his shoulder, its weight heavy with bandages, whiskey, and Colton's rifle. He'll listen if we bring proof. Jeb's testimony, the bullet-ridden fence. Rails, Zara nodded. And if he won't, we protect ourselves. Colton finished, eyes steeled. They descended the slope, Zara's brace clicking against rocks that had yet to be tamed by dust. When they reached the bank of the shallow creek bisecting Redstone, she paused to gather water in her cupped hands and splash her face. Chilled liquid, a stark contrast to sweat and soot. You look like a ghost, Colton remarked with a faint smile. She attempted a grin that faltered into determination. Better a ghost than a corpse. They crossed the narrow wooden footbridge and stepped onto Redstone's main street. Early risers gazed from doorways, a grizzled blacksmith stoked. Embers, a seamstress pinned fabric in her sunlit window, a barkeep wiped tables through rattling shutters. As Zara and Colton approached, the townsfolk's watchful eyes flicked between them, curiosity tempered by wariness. Sheriff Mallory? Colton called, voice commanding. A stocky man with a neatly trimmed moustache stepped from behind a saloon. Doorway, his badge gleaming. He wore a weathered duster and a wide-brimmed hat, brim-tipped low. Reeves, he greeted, recognition flickering. Heard there was trouble at Bar H Bar last night. Colton's jaw tightened. We need the town's help, Sheriff. Gideon Davenport and his men will be here by nightfall. Mallory's expression hardened. Davenport's gang is trouble, but we have no proof. He glanced at Zara, noting her step and wrapped shawl. And you're the woman who shot one. Of his men? Zara met his gaze squarely. I am, and I will do it again. Mallory's lips pressed thin. He studied her with hawk-like scrutiny. Show me this man. Colton produced Jeb's testament, a blood-stained cloth and a wrapped note from Jeb detailing the attack. Mallory's eyes flicked to the fence rails jutting through the barnyard dust, then to the note. He nodded decisively. "Come with me." He led them to the sheriff's office, a compact building of stained wood and barred windows. Inside, a sturdy desk bore a ledger and a single lantern, still lit from early hours. Mallory motioned to a chair, and Zara sat, the tightness in her. Chest worsening, he slid Jeb's note across the desk. "You claim Davenport hired men to terrorize the ranch?" Colton spoke first. "They shot me and set out to kill my ranch hands. They've already taken livestock." Mallory glanced at Zara. "What of your part?" Zara lifted her chin. "I defended innocence." Her words sounded simple, irrevocable. Mallory rubbed his mustache, eyes drifting to the ledger. "Very well. I'll send deputies to the ranch, but they're few. We may be outgunned." Zara's pulse surged. "Then arm the townsfolk." Mallory's expression darkened. "You want a riot?" She squared her shoulders. "I want justice and the right to live." The sheriff leaned back, studying her. "I can't officially arm civilians, but we can muster volunteers under watch. I'll deputize those willing. They stand under the law, and they serve the town." "Do it," Colton urged. Mallory nodded reluctantly. "I'll post word at the saloon and the general store." He paused, gaze on Zara. "And you'll join us in organizing defenses." Zara stood, boots ringing on wood floor. "Yes." Outside, they found a gathering crowd in front of the saloon. A handbill scrawled in charcoal hung on a post. "Town meeting at high noon. Deputize volunteers to protect Bar H Bar Ranch against Davenport gang." Rumors swirled in whispered breaths, faces etched with dread and defiant hope. At the stroke of 12, Mallory ascended the saloon steps. Townsfolk clustering below, a mix of farmers, ranchers and drifters, fell silent. The sheriff raised a hand. "Men and women of Redstone," he began, voice steady though strained. "The Davenport gang threatens us all. Last night at Bar H Bar, their hired guns killed and wounded. They plan to take this valley by force." Murmurs rippled. "But we are not defenseless," Mallory continued. "We will form a militia. We deputize volunteers to stand with the law. We train at the ranch yard this afternoon. We drive Davenport's gang back into the desert where they belong." Eyes hardened, grips tightened on worn rifles. Zara and Colton moved to the edge of the crowd. She noticed Riley standing next to Hank, gaze bright with admiration and fear. Even little Riley had his fists clenched, as though holding an invisible rifle. "We need weapons and ammunition," Zara whispered to Colton. "The general store has some." They made their way to the store, where wooden crates held shotguns, revolvers, and barrels of cartridges. The storekeeper, Mr. Whitlock, tall and gaunt, handed weapons to volunteers, each mount bearing scars of use and age. "Take care," Whitlock warned, eyes flicking to Zara and Colton. "If we lose this, you'll land. We lose ourselves." Zara nodded, hefting a shotgun that felt almost like an extension of her arm. "We will not lose it." By mid-afternoon, 40 volunteers drilled in the ranch yard under Mallory's strict supervision. Men and women practiced loading and firing, suspicion in their eyes tempered by determination. Zara observed, offering corrections. "Elbows up. Aim for the chest. Keep your footing." Her voice, firm and unyielding, cut through fear. Colton organized flank defenses, stacked crates behind fence rails for cover, hay bales forming shield walls around the barn entrance. Riley perched on a wooden post, watching with wide eyes, clutching his toy horse as if it carried the combined courage of every lost soul. The sun dipped lower, the valley's shadows lengthening. An uneasy tension permeated the air, like the hush before a storm. "Stand by your posts," Colton ordered. "Mallory and I will return to the town once we finalize plans. Zara, you're on frontline watch." She nodded, shouldering her shotgun as the valley exhaled a final swelter of heat. The volunteers took positions. Constable Grant on the east flank, Butcher Thomas on the west, schoolteacher Miss Elliot by the barn door. The wind stirred, carrying the scent of gunpowder, hay, and distant sage. Zara felt everything sharpen, the cool metal of her shotgun, the hollow thump of her brace, the locket's pulse against her chest. Then midnight's fiery glow ignited the horizon. Riders emerged from the Red Rock Pass. Davenport's gang, 20 strong, pistols and rifles swinging in the late light. Gideon led them, posture regal in cruelty, eyes gleaming like onyx. A hush rippled through the ranch yard as both sides faced. Off across the low fence, Zara's breath hitched, but she squeezed the shotgun stock. Gideon raised his arm, a cruel grin twisting his face. "Come out, cowards," he taunted, voice carrying across the stillness. Zara held her ground, breath steady. Behind her, volunteers tensed. Mallory's voice rang out, "Stand your ground, men and women of Redstone. Defend the valley," Gideon spat. "Reeves, you send a woman front and center. Makes me sick." Zara's gaze locked on Gideon, steel raging in her eyes. "This woman stands between you and her home. Draw another bead and I'll take you down." First, the outlaw's lip curled as the two sides raised weapons. Fire flared, echoing thunder as the final rattle of ultimatum fell into violence. Midway, interjection. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now back to the story. The gunfire erupted in a cacophony of shouts, the earth trembling under a hail of lead. Volunteers hunched behind cover, firing cautiously at advancing figures. Sparks danced where bullets slammed into wood and metal. Zara squeezed her trigger, the shotgun's roar ripping through the chaos. She aimed at a bandit's shoulder, breaking his aim and sending him sprawling. Gideon's eyes narrowed, fury erupting. He found her amidst the fray. Zara Beaumont, spine, straight, shot, still smoking. He saw determination etched in her features and felt a surge of hatred. "Coward!" he barked, raising his revolver. He sprinted toward her, cover flanking his path. Zara pivoting her shotgun toward the charging outlaw. The echoes of rifle shots crescendoed behind her as volunteers held the line. She tracked Gideon's approach, the strands of her hair blasted against her temples. He closed the distance, raucous laughter spilling from his lips. The world slowed. Gideon's revolver leveled at her chest, the muzzle glinting under the dying sun. The moment stretched taut, every heartbeat drawn out. Zara steadied the shotgun's weight, breathing measured despite the barrel's blaze, inches from her face. Time snapped back as her finger squeezed the trigger. The blast reverberated, and Gideon's body jerked before crumpling behind his horse. Dust and smoke swirled. A hush followed the shot, a final jarring note that rang clear as a church bell. The remaining outlaws hesitated, confusion rippling across their ranks. Colton seized the moment. "Push them back," he roared. Volunteers surged, shouting, guns swaying in practiced arcs. Redstoners pressed forward, each shot measured Tom's. Rifle cracked, felling a rider. Miss Elliot's nimble hand dispatched 2 more. Gideon's gang broke under the assault, retreating toward Red Rock cliffs and dust-choked trails. At last, the valley fell silent. The prisoners, 6 men, stood cuffed, eyes downcast, as Mallory herded them toward the saloon. Zara leaned against the fence, mind numbed by adrenaline's ebb. Smoke curled from Gideon's fallen body, half concealed by churned earth. Her legs trembled, and she gripped the spent shotgun with trembling fingertips. Colton approached, carrying Jeb's crutch and a bruised dark boot. Jeb had rallied, aiding in the fight despite his wound, guided by Zara's unwavering support. "You did it," Colton murmured, voice thick with pride and relief. She met his gaze, chest heaving. "We did." He knelt, pressing a bandage to Jeb's and thigh. "You risked everything." Jeb's grin faded into a pained smile. "I owe her my life." Zara shook her head. "No, We owe each other." A cheer rose from the ranch hands, and townsfolk gathered on the ridge above. Their voices, a chorus of relief and defiance, carried on the wind. Colton rose and extended a hand to Zara. She grasped it firmly, and they stood side by side, silhouettes framed by the valley's glowing twilight. The ridge shimmered in the lingering daylight, where horses grazed. The saloon's doors stood open as townsfolk celebrated, and the jailhouse brimmed with outlaws bound for trial. Zara looked at Colton, the locket glinting at her throat. "We've changed this valley," he nodded, "and it changed us." She traced a finger along the locket's engraving, recalling Samuel's final words. "I came to be whole. I didn't know how much I needed to fight." Colton placed a hand on her brace. "You're stronger than any man I've known." Zara met his gaze, emotion glowing like embers beneath starlight. "Then let's keep this land safe together." As dusk deepened, the valley exhaled one last time, and peace settled like a benediction. Zara, once an orphaned bride mocked for, her Limp now stood a guardian of Redstone, unyielding spirit forged in dust and blood. In the quiet after battle, she and Colton turned toward the cabin by the creek, hand in hand, ready to face whatever dawn would bring. End of Part 5. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. The sun's first rays danced across the creek's rippling surface, casting a golden glow through the tall cottonwoods that lined the water's edge. Mist hovered above the water, curling like ghostly tendrils, and the air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and fresh pine. In a small cabin built of weathered logs, Zara stirred beneath a simple quilt, her dreams filled with the echo of gunfire and Gideon's cold gaze. She blinked against the morning light filtering through the window, her heart still pounding with echoes of the previous night's battle. Slowly, she sat up, wincing as the wooden floorboards groaned beneath her weight. Her brace clicked softly against the rough planks, a steady reminder of her viability and her vulnerabilities. She rubbed the sleep from her eyes, scanning the modest furnishings, a rough-hewn table, a chipped basin for water, a small desk upon which Samuel Harrington's locket rested, its chain glinting in the dawn. Zara reached out, fingers tracing the silver's cool surface, recalling the promise etched within. "My heart rides with you." She inhaled deeply, drawing in the morning's chill and the promise of a new day. Colton stirred beside her, the rise and fall of his chest steady in sleep. His coat hung on a peg by the door, damp from the previous night's rain. He had insisted Zara rest while he watched over the captured outlaws at the jailhouse, but she had refused. Instead, they had shared a single bed, both too wound up to sleep peacefully. Now, in the quiet, she felt the weight of exhaustion settle in her limbs. Carefully, she swung her legs over the bed's edge, planting her feet on the creaking floor. Each movement was deliberate, as though she were learning to walk anew. She winced, not from physical pain so much as from remembrance. Colton's blood, the acrid scent of gunpowder in her nostrils, Gideon's laughter as he fell. At the cabin's door, Zara paused, listening to the world beyond. Birdsong greeted the dawn, chanting sparrows and warbling finches, weaving a tapestry of sound that seemed to heal the night's wounds. She exhaled, shoulders relaxing, and stepped outside. Colton sat on the porch, a battered tin cup cradled in his hands, steam rising from steaming coffee that he had brewed over a small hearth. He looked up as Zara approached, his eyes softening. He stood, brushing damp threads of hair from her brow. "Morning," he said, voice husky from sleep. Zara smiled faintly, wrapping her shawl tighter. "Morning. Did you rest?" He set the cup on the porch railing and reached for her hand. I dozed off once the jailhouse was secure. They're all locked away, Gideon's men, the rest of Davenport's gang. Mallory handled the formalities. He gestured toward the valley below, where Redstone's rooftops glowed in the early light. Zara regarded the town with a sense of guarded pride. The saloon sign creaked gently in the breeze, and the jailhouse stood as silent sentinel, a monument to law and the valley's defiance. She took a steadying breath. Then it's done? We're safe? Colton nodded, his gaze drifting across the creek that wound through their land. For now, the valley's changed. He paused, resting his hand on her shoulder. But so have we. She traced the line of his jaw with her eyes, recalling the horror etched on his face when the bullet grazed his chest. I keep thinking of Jeb. He's recovering. A slight shadow passed across Colton's face. Doc Rivers says he'll live, but it may be weeks before he can walk again. I went to see him this morning. He's in the room across from young Riley's. Zara's heart clenched. Jeb Turner, the young man she had saved from the arroyo, had repaid her by firing the shot that broke Gideon's advance. He had risked everything, and now he paid the price. Zara wrapped her shawl tighter, determined to check on him, but she hesitated. Wait, Colton said, catching her glance. His voice was gentle. You need strength too. She nodded, though the ache in her chest was more than fatigue. It was a hunger for purpose, or perhaps a fear that without the fight, she would unravel into dust. She squared her shoulders. I will, but after that I want to see Jeb. Colton smiled, pride warming his gaze. All right, we'll go together. They stepped down the cabin's stone steps, Zara's brace clicking on the worn stones. Dawn's light cast everything in relief. A scattering of wooden fences, a small corral where the mare nibbled morning grass, and the hint of a trail leading toward Redstone. At the creek's edge, Zara paused, gazing at her reflection in the rippling water. The brace was visible, a metal arch beneath her skirt, leather straps winding around her thigh. Her shadow stretched, long, merging with Colton's behind her. She saw not weakness, but an emblem of her resilience. She knelt, cupping the chilly water in her hands and splashing it on her face. The sharp sting was a welcome shock, reminding her that she was alive. Colton joined her, kneeling beside Zara. He cupped his own hands and drank deeply, watching her. How did you get here? He asked softly, nodding toward the brace. She sighed, water dripping from her eyelashes. I was 8. My father left home and never returned. My mother fell ill, and I had to help her. One night, a bandit ambushed us. My father's horse bolted. He never came back. My mother died of fever a month later. I begged at saloons, did odd jobs, and the fever hit me next. By the time I woke, they told me I would never walk without this brace. She tapped the metal. I learned that broken is the world's opinion. I decided I would never let it be mine. Colton looked at her with a softness Zara had only glimpsed once, in Samuel's letters. You've carried that weight well. Zara pressed a kiss to his knuckles, mindful of his fading wound. Enough about me. Let's see Jeb. They rose and crossed the small grass patch toward the ranch house, a modest building with a broad porch and several rooms aligned in a row. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of antiseptic and straw. Riley sat on a cot next to Jeb, propping up a basin of water and cloths. His hair was matted, but his eyes shone with quiet determination. Jeb lay half-reclined, arm over his eyes, as though grappling with sleep and fever. Zara knelt beside him, brushing damp curls from his forehead. She saw each rise and fall of his breath, each twitch of pain. You look better, she murmured, voice laced with relief. He opened one eye, blinking against the light. When he saw her, his lips curved into a weak smile. I seen you out there. You saved town and ranch. Again, his voice rasped, as if each word was a toll taken by pain. Zara pressed a cloth to his brow. Take it slow. Doc Rivers says you need rest. Jeb groaned, a sound like wind through dead branches. "Mom, I want to help. I ain't good for much now, but I can do something." Riley scowled at Jeb. "You're supposed to rest." Jeb lifted a shaking hand to ruffle Riley's hair. "I know, but I don't want to be a burden." His gaze flicked to Zara. "What about you? You limp, and that brace slows you. But you were out there leading men." Pain and admiration mingled in his eyes. "How do you do it?" Zara smiled, a soft warmth in her gaze. "I do it because there's something worth fighting for. People who believed in me. Colton believed in me." She pressed her hand to his, feeling the fever's heat. "And now everyone in this valley believes we can stand together." Jeb exhaled sharply, nodding. "Together, huh?" His gaze drifted to Riley, who sat silently, absorbing every word. "Exactly," Zara said, brushing Jeb's hair from his forehead. "We'll rebuild the ranch. Colton, Hank, and the others will need help. You and Riley can help however you can." Riley's face brightened. "I can fetch water, carry supplies, anything." Jeb chuckled, despite the wince that followed. "Yeah, kid, you can do that, and maybe I'll teach you how to rope a calf once this leg's better." Zara watched, the two with a swelling in her chest, a blend of maternal pride and sisterly protectiveness. She turned to Colton, who stood at the doorway. "We've done well," he said quietly, eyes on the two. Zara nodded. "But there's more to do. We need to make this valley safe, not just from outlaws, but for families, for futures." She glanced at Jeb's cot. "Jeb and Riley are the next generation. We have to build something worth inheriting." Colton stepped closer, slipping an arm around her waist. "We will. Together." He kissed the crown of her head. A sudden knock sounded at the door, its rapping urgent. Zara's heart leapt. Colton moved to answer. He swung the door open to reveal Hank, his face drawn beneath heavy brows. Behind him stood two townsfolk, Mr. Whitlock and Thomas Miller, both carrying rifles, faces grim. "What is it?" Colton asked. Hank nodded toward the horizon beyond the valley. "We got word Adam Reed found tracks leading toward the East Ridge. Looks like some of Davenport's men slipped away last night." Zara's breath caught. She stared at the ridge, where jagged rocks jutted against the sky. A chill rippled down her spine. "Are they coming back?" she asked, voice steady though her heart throbbed. Hank inhaled. "Not exactly. They're heading to the old salt flats. They plan to regroup with a new gang there." Colton's eyes narrowed. "If they join forces, they could be back with twice the men." Zara closed her eyes, steeling herself. "Then we can't wait for them to come to us." She turned to Colton. "We need to strike before they gather." Strength. Thomas Miller, a wiry farmer with calloused hands, spoke up. "But our men are weak after last night. Supplies low, and winter's coming." Zara lifted her chin, recalling the steel forged in last night's battle. "We'll rally more from Redstone. We'll gather what we need. Food, ammunition, and men. Then we ride east before they can form their new alliance." Colton placed a hand on her shoulder. "You lead. I'll follow." Hank nudged Riley aside. "Kid, run to the stables. Get the horses ready." Riley sprinted away, heart pounding with excitement and fear. Zara took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of pine and sweat. She met Colton's gaze. "We march at noon." He nodded, eyes blazing. As Zara turned to organize the room, saddles, weapons, provisions, she paused at the window, staring at the East Ridge. Mist still clung to its slopes, hiding the sun for now. She felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders, but beneath it was a flicker, a sense of purpose, a flame kindled by every life she had vowed to protect. And so, as the valley stirred beneath her, Zara Beaumont, scarred and unbroken, prepared to lead Redstone's defenders toward an uncertain future, knowing that the choices she made now would shape the valley's destiny, one hard-fought victory at a time. Midday sun baked the trail along the east ridge, turning the earth to shifting copper and making each breath feel heavy with heat. Zara led a modest company of Redstone volunteers, Hank and his 2 ranch hands, Marcus and Reggie, Mr. Whitlock, and a handful of farmers armed with rifles, and Riley perched in the saddle of a young gelding, his eyes alight with resolve. Jeb remained behind, still too weak to ride, but armed with a lever-action carbine in case danger loomed too close. To Redstone itself, Colton rode beside Zara, the morning's plan etched on his rugged face. His left hand rested on his chest, where the scar from Gideon's bullet lay hidden beneath a clean shirt. His prosthetic leg, polished and fitted, was secured in the stirrup, each step of his horse a reminder of the sacrifices made. The locket lay against Zara's chest, its inscription a constant echo in her mind. They rode east, following the narrow path that wound above the salt flats, bleached expanses of cracked earth stretching toward distant mesas. A thin haze shimmered over, the ground reflecting the sun's glare. In the valley below, ghostly patterns of salt remnants revealed where water once pooled, now a barren wasteland. Zara's gaze swept over the flats, heart pounding with equal measures of dread and determination. The ridge beneath their horses' hooves was peppered with rock formations, natural watchtowers that offered vantage points over the flats. She signaled to Colton. He nodded, and they halted the company behind an outcrop of sandstone where a narrow shelf provided cover. "We camp here," Zara said softly, dismounting and leading Riley's gelding to a cluster of shrubs for grazing. "You 5, she gestured to Hank, Marcus, Reggie, Mr. Whitlock, and farmers Jenkins and Hopkins, "are with me. The rest stay here with Riley and the horses." They murmured assent, unsaddling their mounts. Zara watched as the volunteers doffed dust-caked hats, sweat beading on brows. The young men exchanged nervous glances, aware that every step forward creaked closer to danger. Colton dismounted beside her, scanning the flats below. They could be anywhere out there. Zara nodded, tracing the edges of the salt flats where dust swirled like stagnant snow. According to Reed's tracking, they turned south, following the creek toward the flat's edge. They'll need water soon. We catch them there. "Risky," Hank muttered, his weathered face creased with concern. "If they see us first, they'll stampede horses or spring an ambush." Zara met his gaze, unwavering. "Then we use the land against them. We split into 2 groups. Colton and I take the left flank. You 5 take the right. When they move, for water, we close in. We'll trap them between us and the cliff's approach." Marcus cracked his knuckles. "I like it. No fancy cover needed, just 2 packs of angry bastards riding out for blood." Reggie nodded. "We hit hard and swift." Zara examined their young faces. Hank's wiry determination, Whitlock's gaunt resolve, Jenkins's calloused hands turning pale in the sun, Hopkins's nervous energy. She placed a hand on Jenkins's shoulder. "Remember, stay quiet and wait for my signal. Don't fire until we do. 1 shot too soon, and they scatter." He swallowed. "Yes, ma'am." Zara returned to her horse, water canteens slung at her. "Saddle." She mounted with practiced ease, despite the lingering ache in her brace. Colton seated himself beside her, revealing a small map, Reed's tracked path drawn in rough charcoal lines. They camped here. He pointed to a crease where sagebrush dotted the flats. "We'll follow on foot, keeping low, dodge the salts, glare, stay in the shadows of the boulders." Zara nodded. "We move now before the sun's apex. Mercy is for those who ask for it." She handed the map back. Silently, they led their flank along a narrow ledge, horses hobbled out of sight, tethered to scrubby bushes. The ground beneath their boots crunched, minerals popping beneath each step. Zara's heart hammered with every crunch, as though the flats recognized each footfall as an intrusion. They reached a vantage point barely 200 yards from the hidden camp. Through a crack in the rock, Zara spied the camp's ragged tents behind a line of sagebrush. 5 men, some wounded, bathed in the shallow creek. A small fire smouldered, and their horses hobbled nearby, water sloshing in a trough. Gideon Davenport himself stood among them, arms akimbo, limping toward the creek's edge on wooden crutches. His bandaged stump was a visible testament to Zara's shot. Rage and hatred simmered on his hawk-like face as he raised his crutch, slamming it against a barrel. "Damn Reeves and that woman! They'll pay for this!" he snarled. Zara's breath caught. He still burned with a vengeance that threatened to consume them all. She slipped her finger to her lips, signaling silence. Colton's whistle was a soft breath. Zara watched as he raised a hand, 2 fingers extended. 2 minutes, he whispered. She nodded. Behind him, the right flank remained silent, coiled. Like viper, the volunteers ducked behind boulders, rifles poised. Riley, sitting his gelding, watched Zara and Colton, eyes wide as he gripped his rifle stock. Gideon roared, jerking his head toward the flats. "Search for the others! Avery, Brooks, take the flank east, chase them to the edge and pick off anyone who tries to run." The men barked assent, scattering across the flats toward the ridge's far slope. A wounded figure, Avery, took hold of his holster, pistol clutched in a blood-smeared hand. He stumbled, but rage propelled him forward. Zara's heart pounded. The signal had come early, faster than expected. She matched Colton's gaze and touched his arm. "Now!" Horses thundered from either flank. Hank's group emerged from cover, shotguns spitting flame. Zara fired her pistol, the crack echoing as bullets tore through canvas and bone. Freed from restraint, the outlaws scrambled, panic erupting. Dust spiraled as men fell, others fled. For cover. Screams ripped the air, an avalanche of fear and pain. Colton led the charge, rifle blazing. He slipped, prosthetic clanking against rocks, but he found purchase and squeezed off another shot, a precise hit in Brooks's shoulder. Brooks collapsed, and Reed's men wavered. Zara advanced, stride determined. She saw Gideon hobble toward the creeping panic, crutch thudding against rock. Dixon, the smallest of Reed's survivors, aimed at Zara, pistol trembling. "Get down!" Colton roared, drawing Dixon's fire. The bullet whizzed past Zara's ear, ripping a strand of hair. She dove behind a boulder, heart hammering. Hank's booming voice echoed. "Now!" Whitlock's rifle barked, felling Dixon before he could reload. Reggie's shotgun blast blasted away the stock of another outlaw's weapon, sending him roaring into the flats. Zara seized her moment. She rose, covering shaky ground, and fired 2 rounds at Gideon's barrel. The metal erupted, splintering beneath the salt's glare. Gideon fell back, staggering, one crutch clattering away. Zara advanced as Gideon steadied himself, rage contorting his face. He drew a derringer from his boot, hands shaking with shock and fury. He fired. The shot cracked against Zara's brace, metal buckling but holding firm. Pain stabbed through her leg, a white-hot flare that blurred her vision. Gideon cackled, limping forward, confident in victory. "Can't crawl out of this, Beaumont." He raised his pistol for a killing blow. Heat and determination flooded Zara. She lifted her brace, instinct guiding her aim, and fired. The shot rang out. Precise. Final. Gideon's head jerked and he collapsed, his pistol clattering across the cracked earth. Silence fell. The few surviving outlaws scattered into the flats, terror fueling their flight. Colton and the volunteers rushed forward, securing the men who hadn't yet fled. Jeb's terrified cry echoed from the ridge above. He had followed Riley's instructions and brought reinforcements, 2 wagons of armed townsfolk who had followed the dust trail. Zara sank to one knee, the searing pain in her leg intensifying. Colton knelt beside her, concern etched across his face. "Stay with me," he whispered, lifting her chin. Blood seeped through her skirt, dark and hot. She met his gaze, determination blazing. "We finished it," she rasped. "Davenport's gang is broken. Colton pressed a hand to her leg, tangible warmth seeping into her flesh. "You finished it, Zara. Don't crow too soon." Riley galloped up, eyes wide with horror at Zara's wound and Gideon's lifeless form. He dismounted and knelt beside her. "Miss Beaumont, are you okay?" She forced a smile. "Better than him," she said, nodding toward Gideon. Her vision swam, the world tilted. She felt faint, her strength draining like water from cracked stone. Marcus rushed forward, hauling Zara into a gentle cradle. "She's hurt real bad," he called. Colton dropped to his knees, wrapping a clean cloth around Zara's thigh to staunch the bleeding. His strong hands, once steady in battle, trembled with fear. Zara's vision darkened at the edges as the adrenaline faded. "Hold on, Zara," Colton whispered, voice breaking. She tried to nod, but her head lolled against his shoulder. "Dying. I can't let—" "Valley," she whispered, voice failing. Colton pressed his lips to her forehead. "You won't die. I won't let you." With Riley and the volunteers' help, they lifted Zara onto a stretcher, 2 long poles slung beneath, a horse blanket. Despite the pain, Zara's final vision was of Gideon's broken form beneath the midday sun, the flats echoing with the distant thunder of horses' hooves as the remaining outlaws fled. As they carried her down the ridge toward Redstone, Zara's consciousness slipped like water through fingers. Yet beneath the haze, she felt Colton's grip, strong and unwavering, and somewhere, in that twilight between life and darkness, she thought she heard Samuel's voice whisper on the wind. "My heart rides with you." Zara's world swirled in a haze of pain and fractured light. When her eyes finally fluttered open, she was surrounded by whitewashed walls and the muted scent of antiseptic. Something cool and damp pressed against her thigh, bandages swathed tight against her skin. She grimaced, every breath a stab through her ribs, and pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the steady swell and fall of her lungs. Blurry forms moved at the edges of her vision, a woman's gentle hands adjusting a tray of steaming broth, a man's shadowed silhouette pacing near a wooden door, a boy's anxious face hovering at the foot of a cot. The shard of memory that fought to surface was painful. Gideon's lifeless body beneath the midday sun, Colton's voice, a frantic plea, and the burning ache where the outlaw's bullet had struck her leg. Cold dread settled in her stomach, and when she attempted to lift her head, a searing pain forced her back against the pillow. "Easy there." The man's voice was calm, but strained with worry. He knelt beside her cot, his hat in his hands. When he leaned forward, Zara recognized the storm-gray eyes and shadowed stubble. "Colton Reeves." "Colton," she rasped, voice raw. The world wavered, and she closed her eyes, fighting nausea. He pressed a finger to her forehead. "You're feverish. I've been here since we brought you in." He brushed hair from her brow. "You were losing blood fast, and then you went limp. We thought you might not make it." His voice cracked, grief and relief mingling. Her chest heaved as she struggled for air. "Did they get away? Any of them?" Her words were urgent shards. Colton's jaw tightened. "We rounded up every last one campsite. The townsfolk helped. Keep watch. Gideon's gone, but the rest are locked away in the Redstone jail. They'll hang for what they did." Zara's eyes fluttered closed, tears pooling in her temples. Guilt and exhaustion wove a tight knot in her chest. "I led them. I shot him." Colton's fingers brushed her hand gently. "You saved us, all of us. They would have slaughtered anyone defending this valley. Rest now. You have to get strong." She opened her eyes, forcing focus on the crease of his lips. "I thought I was invincible." Her voice trailed, haunted by the memory of her world tipping into darkness as she lost consciousness. He settled into the chair beside her, hat now resting in his lap. "None of us are invincible, but you fought like hell. You saved my life." He paused, gaze drifting to the door where young Jeb lingered, face pale, eyes rimmed with worry. Speaking of which, Jeb's been looking for you. He's worried. Zara's heart constricted at the thought of the boy she had rescued, now nursing his own scars. I need to see him. Colton stood, hesitating. Doc Rivers said not yet. Your fever spiked last night. They nearly lost you. He says any movement could open the wound. Tears sprang to Zara's eyes. Jeb risked his life for me. She tried to sit, but a fresh wave of pain buckled her. Colton caught her, rudely reminding her of her frailty. Not yet, he repeated gently. Rest, Zara. Defeated, she sank back against the pillows. Colton leaned down, pressing a tender kiss to her temple before slipping from the room. The door closed softly, leaving Zara alone. She stared at the muted sunlight drifting across the cot's linens. Outside, a hawk's cry echoed across the valley, and she found herself twisting her head against her pillow, trying to glimpse the sail of white in the sky. The valley she had fought for stretched in every direction. The gnarled cottonwoods, by the creek, the hazy glimpse of Redstone's rooftops, the salt flats where Gideon's men lay broken. But now, within these whitewashed walls, she was powerless, confined by pain and fever and the uncertainty of whether she would ever walk. Again without that brace, her breath trembled as she drifted, slanted memories giving way to feverish dreams. In her mind, she hovered between past and present. Samuel's laughter beneath the canyon sky, Colton's hand pressed to her own as they survived the battle, and Gideon's last curse as she pulled the trigger. The ache in her leg pulsed like a second heartbeat, a grim reminder of her mortality. Afternoon light filtered through the window, and a soft knock prompted Jeb's appearance at the door. He leaned in slowly, as if stepping into the presence of a sleeping monarch. His face was pale, eyes haunted by last night's violence. "Miss Beaumont," he whispered, voice trembling, I brought you something." He stepped forward, revealing a small wooden box lacquered with desert roses. Zara's heart clenched. "Jeb, you should be resting." He forced a weak smile and shook his head. "Doc said I could see you. I needed to know you were alive." He held out the box. "I made this at the livery, carved it from a scrap of pine, for you." Zara reached through the haze, lifting the box to her lap. It was rough, edges smoothed by Riley's patient instruction and Jeb's careful hands. Inside, nestled among faded velvet, was a small silver medallion engraved with a single word, Valor. Below it, a simple turquoise stone glittered like a shard of sky. She closed her eyes, letting tears slip free. The locket pressed against her chest, and when she opened her palm, the medallion fit there like the final piece of a puzzle. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Jeb knelt beside her cot, shoulders hunched against shame. You risked everything. I was scared. When you fell, I thought I'd lost you." His voice cracked. "I don't know how to repay you." Zara pressed the medallion to his palm, finding his strong pulse throbbing beneath her fingers. "By living, Jeb, by making this valley what it should be. By remembering there is beauty worth fighting for, even after it's been scorched by men like Gideon." He swallowed, eyes glistening. "I'll try." She reached up, brushing a strand of hair behind his ear. "I know you will." She closed. Her eyes again, exhaustion, spiraling her back into unsteady dreams. A murmur of voices pulled her between sleep and wakefulness. She cracked her eyes to find Colton and Dr. Rivers standing in the doorway. Dr. Rivers wore a grave expression. Colton's shoulders were set, as if bracing against a storm. "Doc?" Zara whispered, panic trailing behind every word. The doctor stepped inside, closing the door gently. "Zara, the fever's broken. You should start physical therapy soon, but your wound is infected. We need to debride it." Zara's breath hitched. Her vision flickered as nausea rose. Dr. Rivers placed a steady hand on her shoulder. The bullet introduced bacteria into the tissue. I've been cleaning it daily, but the infection's deep. We have to operate. If we don't remove the necrotic tissue, you risk losing your leg." His gaze softened. "You've been through so much already. You have to be strong." A wave of horror crashed through Zara. Losing her leg, she could barely comprehend it. I can't lose it. I fought too hard." Colton knelt beside her, lifting her hand to his lips. "I know, love. But if it's infected, you'll lose your life before your leg. We'll do everything we can. I'll be here." She swallowed against a dry throat, tears stinging. "When?" "Tomorrow morning," Dr. Rivers answered quietly. "For now, rest. I'll come back with supplies." The doctor and Colton left, closing the door behind them. Zara's chest rattled as she struggled to breathe. Jeb hovered nearby, eyes wide with terror. She squeezed his hand, trembling. "Jeb," she exhaled. "Promise me something." He nodded, voice thick. "Anything, Miss Beaumont. Protect Riley when I can't." Hate and fear and fierce love danced in her pulse. "Help him become the man he needs to be. Don't let this valley forget what we fought for." He trembled, nodding through tears. "I promise." Zara let her eyelids fall shut as exhaustion seized her. Through the haze, she saw Colton standing at the foot of her cot, scraping a chair with his boot. When she drifted deeper into unconsciousness, his voice remained with her, soft as a benediction. "My heart rides with you always." The operation room's air was antiseptic and cold. Zara's vision swam as the ether took hold. Hands, gloved and firm, guided her onto a table. Dr. Rivers murmured instructions to an assistant as cologne-tinged breaths passed near her face. Then darkness. When she awoke, the world was brighter, sharper. The pain plunged into her leg as Dr. Rivers leaned over her, eyes grave. "It's done. The infection was deep, but I cleaned it thoroughly. You have some nerve damage, but your leg remains." Zara's breath trembled. Thank you." She closed her eyes against the pain and relief. "Physical therapy starts tomorrow," the doctor continued. "Your spirit is strong, Zara. You'll walk again." He exited, leaving her with Colton, who pressed a cool cloth to her forehead. "You're alive. That's what matters." Her lips quivered. "I want to walk." Colton brushed her hair away, eyes shining. "We'll walk together." The sun dipped beneath the ridges, and Zara drifted into a healing sleep, a faint smile gracing her lips. Dawn's gentle glow filtered through the window. Zara's eyes flickered open, the world tilting for a moment before settling. The cot's mattress creaked beneath her, and she tested the movement. Pain cut a low, steady arc through her thigh, but her leg was intact. When she lifted her hand to her chest, she felt the medallion, valor, warm against her skin. She exhaled, scanning the room. Colton slept in a wooden chair by the door, head slumped, hat drawn over his brows. Beside him, Jeb dozed on a small stool, cradling a folded blanket over his rifle like a ragged sentinel. The thin light spilled across their faces, asleep with worry etched in every line. Zara sat up, legs trembling beneath her. She swung her feet to the floor, the contact jolting pain along her thigh. She bit her lip, determined. Her hands found the bedside table, a chipped basin of cool water, and a folded cloth. She wet the cloth and pressed it to her face, eyes closing. As she breathed in the scent of lavender soap, her gaze shifted to the door, where she saw Riley's small figure step in quietly, a cup of steaming coffee in his hands. He approached on tiptoe, eyes bright but wary. "Morning, Miss Beaumont," he whispered, placing the cup on the table. "Thank you, Riley." She lifted the cup, though she knew she mustn't strain herself. The warmth seeped to her chest. He knelt beside her cot, head bowed. "I was worried." She managed a small smile. "You need sleep, Riley. Go rest." He shook his head. "I made a list of things we need to do. Winter's almost here. We need to stockpile firewood, food, and blankets. And we need to rebuild." The fence around the corral, so the horses don't wander. Her heart swelled with pride and tenderness. Thank you. She sipped the coffee, the warmth a gentle fire against the antiseptic chill. Zara, Colton stirred, lifting his head. He rose unsteadily and limped toward them. You awake? Yes. She set aside the cup, wincing as pain lanced through her leg. Colton, I feel like I won't break. The tremor in her voice was one of triumph and fear. He sat at her side, placing her hand in his. You won't. We have everything we need, each other, this valley, and the people who believe in us. Her gaze drifted to Jeb, who'd roused himself and peeked from behind the door. He gave a small nod. I'm ready, Zara attempted, to swing her leg over the side of the cot when a fierce pain shot through her thigh. She stifled a cry, but tears blurred her vision. Colton sprang up. No, don't move. He placed a sturdy hand beneath her arm. I want to stand, she murmured, voice trembling with resolve. Please rest. His voice was gentle but firm. Physical therapy is scheduled this afternoon. You need to build strength gradually. A silence settled, charged with unspoken hope and fear. Zara closed her eyes, breathing through the pain's harsh thunder. When she opened them, her gaze bore into Colton. I will walk again, she vowed. Colton's lips curved in a proud smile. That's my brave warrior. Riley and Jeb moved closer, forming a circle of unwavering support. A small girl who believed in miracles, a young boy who found purpose in service, and a man who loved her beyond measure. As the morning light crept across the cot's linens, Zara felt the valley's pulse within her. The world beyond these walls, the thriving ranch, the rebuilding town, the promise of future winters, awaited her strength. And so, with the first flicker of dawn, Zara Beaumont vowed once more to fight for every breath, every step, and every heartbeat, determined to claim her destiny in the valley that had taught her that broken was never the end. End of Part 8. The sun hovered above the horizon, its rays warming the valley as Zara prepared herself for her first physical therapy session. Her leg, bandaged and sensitized, throbbed with memory, each heartbeat a reminder of the bullet that had nearly taken it. She sat on the edge of her cot, legs dangling, while Jeb adjusted a stack of pillows at her side. Colton helped her settle, careful not to jostle the healing wound. A soft knock sounded at the door. Dr. Rivers entered, arms laden with cloth-wrapped implements. A leather strap, a small wooden stool, and a basin of warm water. His face was calm, assuring. Good morning, Zara. Ready? She nodded, voice husky from lack of sleep. As ready as I'll ever be, he smiled gently. We'll start slow. These first exercises will build strength without overtaxing the healing tissue. He placed the leather strap across the room and helped her slide her foot into it, a cool leather against her skin, sending a shiver up her spine. I'll guide your foot in gentle arcs. Focus on your breathing and let me know if you feel any sharp pain. Dr. Rivers wrapped his fingers around her foot, lifting and turning it. The movement, though slight, sent a flare of agony shooting through her thigh. Slowly, he murmured, voice calm as a placid lake. Not too far. Zara bit her lip, nodding. Okay. He eased her foot back to center. Good. Now flex and point. She inhaled, feeling the pain coalesce into a dull ache. For a moment, the valleys wore. The dust-choked dawn, the thunder of hooves and Gideon's final curse rippled through her memory. She exhaled and flexed her ankle, watching her foot tremble under the strain. Excellent, Dr. Rivers said, beaming. We'll do 10 repetitions. Jeb, please keep count. Jeb stepped forward, eyes blazing with support. 1, 2, 3. He counted as Zara complied, each motion a triumph over both pain and doubt. Colton stood at the doorway, watching with a mixture of pride and relief. He took Jeb's notebook and scribed on the yellowed pages, Zara's first PT, flexion extension, 10 reps. The precision in his eyes was both comforting and unnerving. Colton had always been a man of action and planning, and she recognized the fierce devotion in his every gesture. When they reached 10, Dr. Rivers carefully removed the strap. Zara placed her foot on the floor, testing her weight. The moment. The leg bore her. A tremor rattled through her, body shaking as though she were perched on the edge of a cliff. "Use the stool," Dr. Rivers said, nodding toward a small, leather-covered seat. "Support yourself. Good." Zoara settled onto the stool, wincing as the wound protested. "Can I try walking?" she asked softly. "Later," Dr. Rivers replied. "First, we strengthen those muscles. And you must stay mindful of the infection. Risk. We'll leave the bandage off while you do these exercises." He wrapped her leg in a fresh dressing and let her rest. Zara's gaze drifted across the room to Colton, who offered her a small, proud smile. "You're doing amazing," he said. "I knew you could." She closed her eyes, letting tears blur the edges of her weary features. "I want this leg back. I need it." His hand brushed her shoulder. "It will come, step by step." Riley bustled in, carrying a tray of fresh bread and tea. "I made this for you." He set it beside her, eyes bright despite fatigue. "Thank you, Riley," she said, voice gentle. The warmth of the tea seeped into her bones, a small comfort. As they ate in quiet solidarity, Colton outlined their plans. "We've been rallying in Redstone. Sheriff Mallory is organizing monthly patrols along the East Ridge. We've contracted Marcus and Reggie to rebuild the corral fence. Jenkins and Hopkins are gathering timber. The townsfolk are repairing. The storm damage, winter won't wait." He paused, gaze grave. "But there's another matter, the outlaw's trial." Her heart sank. "It's necessary, though." "Yes, but tensions run high. Some townspeople want blood. They're calling for immediate hangings without proper hearings." Rage coiled in Zara's chest at the thought of summary justice. "They broke the law. They attacked us. They deserve to stand trial." Colton nodded. "That's what Mallory says. We need to convince the town to trust the law, not revenge." Zara set down her mug, resolve blazing. "We should go." He reached for her hand. "Not yet. You need strength. But when you're ready, we'll walk in together." She nodded, though her chest ached at being confined to the cot when the valley needed her. Late afternoon, Zara sat by the window, watching the golden glow drift across the valley. She had spent hours moving her leg through gentle arcs under Dr. Rivers' careful guidance. Each repetition was a small victory, yet each ended in exhaustion. Colton returned from the corral, the scent of fresh-cut pine clinging to him. He propped a bag of tools against the wall. They needed help finishing the east fence. They're close to being done. He paused, gaze meeting hers with a question. She nodded, mustering a weak smile. "Good." He pressed a lantern onto the small table and set to work, sharpening his hunting knife. Occasionally he glanced her way, concern tempered by admiration. Jeb and Riley arrived, trailing a wagon bearing stacked logs and supplies. Their eyes lit when they saw Zara. "Miss Beaumont," Riley called, dashing to her side. "Be careful," she said, reaching to brush dirt from his cheek. He grinned and turned to Jeb, whose face was etched with thought. "Jeb, what do you think?" Jeb knelt beside Zara, pulling from his pockets a folded piece of parchment. Unfolding it, he revealed a drawing of a stone cairn atop the East Ridge. "I found this marked on the old map of the valley, Mum. My grandpa said it was used by scouts to send signals, campfires, reflectors, messages across the flats. If we build a beacon there, we can warn Redstone of future threats." Zara examined the sketch, a sturdy tower of stones, wide enough to hold a fire pit at its summit. The concept stirred her, bridging past and future. "It's brilliant, Jeb," she said, pride warming her throat. "If we light it, anyone approaching from the east will see it from miles away." Riley bounced excitedly. I can help gather stones. Colton nodded, clearly impressed. We'll need permission from the landowner, but I'll ask Mallory. If he's agree, Zara pressed her hand to her chest, coaxing courage from her wound. That would give us a real advantage. Nightfall fell, and the cabin filled with the scent of burning pine. Zara drifted into a dreamless sleep, each breath a lullaby to her aching leg. Pre-dawn light filtered through the windows, and Zara woke with a start. She blinked at the dim glow, realizing her cot was empty. Pushing aside her quilt, she rose, slowly, legs trembling. The wound ached, but her fear of missing something drove her onward. Through the open doorway she glimpsed Colton standing at the window, gazing into the darkness. The lantern's glow silhouetted his frame. "Colton," she rasped. He turned, face drawn. "Jeb found tracks." "Outlaws?" Her pulse leapt. He nodded. "A small band, 5 or 6 strong, heading south toward the foothills. They must be after supplies." Zara's heart raced. If they reached the foothills, they could regroup with allies unknown. The beacon idea flickered like a spark in her. "Mind, we need to stop them." Creed formed in her chest, defying her fatigue. Colton squared his shoulders. "You can't ride yet. Your leg's still weak, and I won't risk you." She shook her head, voice firm despite the danger. "I may not be able to ride, but I can guide them, plan an ambush. You and Jeb can lead the men's party." He hesitated, torn between protection and respect. "You're not strong enough." He looked away, shoulders slumping. "I have to try," she whispered. "If we let them slip through, they'll steal our supplies, and maybe come back with more." He closed, his eyes anguish roiling beneath his exterior. "All right." He exhaled, steeling himself. "We gather at the corral, first light." She nodded, determined. As dawn broke, Zara shawled herself against the chill. The wound stung with every step, but each was a promise. She joined Jeb on the porch, Dr. Rivers waving them off from behind. "Be careful," he warned, voice weary. "We will." Zara met his gaze. "Thank you, Doc." At the corral, 6 men, Hank, Marcus, Reggie, Mr. Whitlock, Jenkins, and Hopkins, waited. Horses hobbled nearby. Jeb stood alert, rifle in his hands. Colton mounted his bay stallion, scanning Zara's flank for guidance. She nodded toward the rocky ravine to the south. "They'll follow the creek until it bends east. Then they'll head toward the foothills. We intercept at the dry gulch. Its narrow entrance gives us cover." The men exchanged glances. "I know where that is," Hank said. "We can funnel them in." Jeb adjusted his rifle strap. "We need to take out their scouts. If they see us, we lose the element of surprise." Zara traced the route with her finger on the map Jeb had sketched. "Exactly. The gulch is a half-mile east. They won't expect anything until they're—" "Oh, too close." Colton nodded. "Let's ride." Zara watched them go, each hoofbeat an echo of her resolve. As they disappeared into the early haze, her gaze drifted upward to the ridges, the silent promise of watchtowers, the cairn's future silhouette. She whispered to the valley, a vow carried on the wind. "I will stand. I will protect our home." And as Redstone slumbered, the valley's defenders moved through dawn's soft light, each breath a prayer, each heartbeat a hammer, forging a future from the crucible of conflict. In the hush before battle, Zara Beaumont, scarred but unbroken, found her purpose once more. End of Part 9. The dawn light was pale and wavering, filtering through the slender pinon pines that skirted the ragged entrance to the dry gulch. Zara Beaumont stood at the head of a ragged line of riders, her jaw set with quiet determination. Her injured leg had been carefully braced, yet the pain still hummed in the core of her being, a stark reminder of how narrowly she had escaped death. Beneath the recoil of the wound lay a fierce urgency, the looming threat of a small band of outlaws streaking southward toward the distant foothills, to regroup with reinforcements. If they succeeded, the valley would face a far darker storm than Redstone had yet seen. Beside Zara, Colton Reeves adjusted the saddle on his bay stallion, nodding once at her before giving a curt command to Jeb Turner. The sun rose behind them, crisp and radiant, illuminating the contours of the arching ridge. Each ridgeline and scrubby shrub took on clarity. The jagged black rock of the gulch entrance, the greying boulders that Zara had chosen for cover, and the slender band of creek water that wound its way through the valley like a silvery snake. The men and women gathered. Hank, Marcus, Reggie, Mr. Whitlock, Jenkins, and Hopkins exchanged tense looks, knuckles whitening on reins and rifle stocks. Riley sat astride his gelding, eyes bright despite the chill of early morning, gripping the spear he had fashioned for emergencies. "All right," Zara murmured, in a voice both soft and resolute. "Remember, wait until I give the signal. They'll follow the creek, but their scouts will keep their heads down until they cross the salt flats at noon. We have a window before they reach the gulch proper." The riders nodded, scanning the muddy trails where faint hoofprints were still visible in the wet earth. It was incredible that the outlaws had passed so close without realizing the trap that had been laid. Reckless desperation led them into the trap, a half-mile of barren flats that could not conceal them from the watchers on the ridge. Zara shifted in the saddle, feeling the leather panel press into her wound. She had practiced, rising to her knees and lowering herself to minimize the pain, but the fragility of her leg was never far from her mind. Each breath felt deliberate, measured, bound to the rhythm of the stirrups' leather straps and the distant hum of cicadas beginning their morning chorus. "Here they come," Jeb whispered, pointing toward a pale wisp of dust on the horizon. The valley held its breath as 6 riders emerged, thin silhouettes against the sunlit flats, some hunched to keep their watches scanning left and right. The leader, a rough-edged man with a crooked grin and a rusty revolver swinging loose from his belt, spurred his mount forward. Behind him, the rest fanned out into a loose skirmish line, eyes gleaming with the anticipation of plunder. A bead of sweat trickled down Zara's temple. She lowered her jaw, her gaze locked on the figure with the crooked grin. This was the scout she had to stop. His spurs would become the alarm. She reached for a burner torch nestled in the guardrail beside her. By design, the bluff offered only one narrow approach, the gulch's entrance, flanked by 2 outcroppings of rock that angled inward like jaws ready to clamp down. "Now!" Zara hissed, roughly flinging the torch toward the brittle brush at the gulch rim. The flame caught with a sputter, licking upward as the dry grass ignited in a fiery arc. The scout wheeled his horse, nostrils flaring. He raised a squinting eye toward the rising smoke, but the clutch of confusion was brief. The horses bolted, hooves churning the earth, as the scout fired a warning shot into the air. "They're on to us," he shouted, voice harsh as broken glass. Simultaneously, the serried ranks emerged from their perch. Colton, his rifle held steady, galloped to the left, while Hank, Marcus, and Reggie followed in a crescent from the right. Mr. Whitlock, Jenkins, and Hopkins fanned out behind, rifles pointed at the bandits, who were still panic-stricken by the sudden smoke. Riley's gelding bucked, sensing the commotion, but the young boy held on, his spear at the ready. The scout threw up his arms, trying in vain to rally his startled companions. The rest of the outlaw band charged forward, instinct and desperation driving them, but the weight of surprise pinned them. "Fire!" Zara ordered, and a salvo of rifle fire cracked from the riders on the left and right. Buckshot spat from Marcus's shotgun, whistling past the scout's shoulder, splintering the rock beside him. The scout darted to the side, his face twisted in a grimace of pain. He spurred his horse back toward the creek, intent on escape, but the plants around his hooves ignited, spewing embers that clung to his coat. Jeb raised his carbine, bringing it to his shoulder, and fired a shot that cracked the leather of the scout's saddle horn. The horse reared, throwing its rider into the path of Colton's stallion. Colton reined around, privileges his weight. to bear the horse away, and the scout stumbled backward, clutching a burning sleeve. "Down, all of you," Zara urged, sinking to her knees on her gelding, wrenching her wounded leg free of the saddle horn. The rest of the bandits faltered, whirling their mounts to find better cover, but they were hemmed in. A ridge of rock to their left, the rising, fire to their right, and the net of riders closing in fast. Hank moved with precision, dispatching one outlaw who had tried to scramble for the ridgeline. 3 shots rang out in quick succession as rifles found their targets. One outlaw fell, from his horse clutching his midsection. Another's arm went limp as a bullet shattered the bone mid-forearm. The third let out a strangled cry before collapsing into the dust. The remaining riders faltered, panic cracking through them. One turned to flee, galloping straight toward a twisting ravine littered with cactus and tumbleweed, only to be confronted by Reggie, who blocked his path and cracked his knuckles on the brim of his shotgun. "Going somewhere?" Reggie snarled, yanking the outlaw from his horse with a brutal jerk. The outlaw struggled feebly, but Jenkins and Hopkins seized his arms and cuffed them behind his back with rough, practiced movements. The last 2 survivors raised their rifles. "Wait, we surrender!" they barked, voice uneven with fear. Zara, stomach churning, rose unsteadily to her booted feet. The sting in her thigh flared sharply, but she gritted her teeth and forced herself erect. "Stand down," she commanded, voice clear and authoritative. The outlaws flicked their reins, shrouded by dread. The horses snorted and stamped, sensing the tension. Zara surveyed the flat. Broken bodies lying in stillness, a small wave of flame creeping out from the bluff's rim, and the arrested forms of horses who had stumbled into the dust and whinnied in alarm. It was a brutal tableau, and yet it was over. Colton appeared beside her in an instant, supporting her under one arm, his face mask-like with relief. "You called it, Zara. No more riding for them." She nodded, wiping sweat from her brow. Pain and exhaustion welled in her chest, but they were eclipsed by a convergence of relief and grim resolve. "Check for wounded." She slumped backward, sinking to her knees in the beaten earth. "Let's secure them and tend to the injured." Nearby, Dr. Rivers had arrived with a wagon repurposed as a makeshift stretcher, while Riley helped tend to the fallen horses. He knelt behind an outlaw who had surrendered at the first volley. "Easy now," he murmured, tending to a bleeding gash above the outlaw's knee. "We'll get you stitched up. You'll be tried in Redstone." The outlaw, face alight with terror and pain, could only nod, tears hissing from his nostrils. Zara watched him with cold eyes, no trace of compassion. He and his gang had murdered, maimed, and sought to break their valley. The law would decide their fate. "Is that everyone?" Colton asked, looking across the flat where the dust had settled into quietude. Jeb stepped forward, riding up on a chestnut mare he had claimed from Redstone's stables. 6 of them down. 2 fled but left trackers. We can hunt them later. He spat into the dust. "The rest are ours." Zara exhaled, a sound caught between relief and exhaustion. She lifted her leg gingerly, the burn of laundered pain surging with the reminder of yesterday's bullet wound. Dr. Rivers approached with a small satchel and a cloth-wrapped poultice. "Let me see that." He slipped to his stomach, then knelt by her. Under the glare of the rising sun, he unwrapped her bandage, and Zara felt the metallic sting of drying blood and healing flesh. He cleaned the gash with an iodine solution, sharp and choking, then applied the poultice, his hands fast and steady. "You're pushing too hard, Beaumont," he muttered, tone reprimanding but wary of her fragility. "Rest by half-mast. One slip and this could become a compound fracture." She sighed, leaning weakly against Colton, who supported her under his arm. "I need to ride tomorrow," she insisted. Dr. Rivers shook his head. "Not yet. You'll take 1 crutch and Riley will assist. If you insist, fine. But don't say I didn't warn you." Colton tightened his arm around her waist. "Whatever you need, Zara. We'll do this your way, carefully." She met his gaze, gratitude shimmering in her storm-grey eyes. Thank you. Henk and Marcus had mounted their horses, riding toward the ridge with two of the bound outlaws in guarded custody. Mr. Whitlock and Reggie drove the wagon toward the creek beyond the bend, collecting wounded bodies to transport back to Redstone for trial and care. Jenkins and Hopkins put out the last of the brush fire with a battered shovel and water from a leather canteen, ensuring no flare-ups would imperil the valley. "Look at what we keep safe," Zara murmured, gesturing toward the valley stretching. Behind them, the cottonwood groves glinting emerald, the meandering creek that had quenched both friend and foe, the first turning leaves of aspens whispering golden promises overhead. Beyond them, on the horizon lay a vision of beauty, Redstone, strung like a wind-blown charm against the sandstone cliff, its rooftops glinting. Colton nodded. "It's all here. We just have to fight for it." She turned her head to the east, ridge, where a sloping cairn of stones jutted into the sky like a sentinel. The foundation was ready. Riley had worked with Mr. Whitlock the previous evening, laying the lowest course in the glow of twilight. Zara exhaled a breath, the ache in her thigh sharpening as she pivoted in the saddle. "The beacon," she said softly, a whisper to the valley and perhaps to herself. "It must burn bright tonight." Colton nodded, gentle determination etched in his face. "We'll see to it." They mounted slowly, Zara leaning heavily into Colton's arm. Riley and Jeb fell into place behind them, escorting the wagon toward the cairn's base. The first step was always the hardest, and as Zara let her injured foot press into the stirrup, she wondered if she could find the strength to hold herself upright. "Lean on me," Colton murmured. She closed her eyes, drawing breath that mixed with pain and hope. When she opened them, she saw the people of the valley united, Riley's face shining with anticipation, Jeb's steely gaze mapping their path, even Marcus and Reggie giving her an approving nod. The sun dipped toward noon, and as it crossed the zenith, Zara lifted her chin. "Let's build that beacon. Together," Colton replied. The riders guided Zara's mounts toward the cairn, each step a measured triumph. When they reached the rocky base, men and boys dismounted swiftly. Zara leaned heavily against her horse's flank, feeling the weight of her leg. Jeb knelt in the dust, pulling out a coil of rope. "You go first," he said reverently. "I'll help." Zara nodded and swung one leg over to straddle the cairn's lowest rocks. The footing was jagged, but her hands found purchase on coarse stone. Colton knelt beside her, lifting her foot to the next ledge. Together they ascended, methodical, careful, despite the madding crowds of sparks that danced between them, anticipating the fire to come. Each handhold was a memory of suffering and survival. The sharp edges bit into her palms, and the scorch of the midday sun was ablaze on her skin. But she pressed on, each foothold a declaration. She was more than broken. She was indomitable. Behind them, the men hoisted baskets of dry oak branches, pine boughs, and tinder into the cairn's summit. Riley clutched a burlap sack of flints, eager to strike the spark. When Zara stood atop the cairn's flat surface, her gaze swept the valley below, Redstone's rooftops glinting, the creek winking like polished silver, the plains stretching eternally to the south. "This is for you, Valley," she whispered, "for every life, every hope." Colton placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. Beside him, Jeb knelt over the tinder, flints in hand. When he struck, the sparks leapt like fireflies. At Zara's signal, he dropped the glowing embers onto the pine and oak. Sparks leapt into wood, and a thin line of smoke curled upward. The flame took, licking at the kindling before swelling into a fierce pillar of fire that crowned the cairn. A cheer rippled through the watchers below, but Zara barely heard it. Tears blurred her vision, but her gaze remained fixed on the fire's roar. As the heat washed over her, she felt the valley stir. Horses snorted unseen, ranch hands paused. to shade their eyes, and the early afternoon wind carried the smoke across the flats. The beacon blazed like a promise to all who dared threaten this place. The defenders of Redstone never slept. When the wind carried the first ribbons of smoke toward Redstone's roofs, Zara allowed herself a breath, a vow fulfilled. Her legs shook beneath her, but it was a tremor not of weakness, but of triumph. She was healing, mending like the valley itself. Colton drew her into his arms, lifting her into an embrace that spoke of shared victory and an unspoken future. "We did it," he whispered. Zara pressed her cheek to his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "We did." Behind them, Jeb and Riley watched, inspired. If a broken woman could climb a rock cairn and light a beacon, they too could face their fears. As the sun dipped lower, casting elongated shadows on the valley, the flame atop the cairn burned bright. Zara Beaumont, scarred, broken, and now reforged, stood unfaltering at its summit, a sentinel of hope. End of Part 10.